I did say to you right at the start, there's no rule changes, and they're right. There's just a few changes to regulations and so on. No equipment or other items have to be placed in the goals. So, you know, those people on defensive corners of the face masks, you can't just chuck them in the back of the net. All right? They've got to go outside. I find that most of the coaches with a bit of nous about them instruct their goalkeepers to do that tidying up for them. There has been a regulation put out about hand protectors. We don't have a problem. I haven't seen any issue at all here in Brisbane. Therefore, I advise BWHA not to bother doing one. I don't know whether they have enough. But there's a box here that will be on the tech benches at major national championships and at FIH tournaments. Your hand gloves are supposed to go into that little box. It's not a problem here in Brisbane, so it's not something that I'm certainly not going to be bothered about. Knee pads, there's some clarification regarding their use at penalty corners. Once again, I don't see a problem, but the new regulation says that they should be the same colour as the socks. Good luck with that. All right, it's not something I'm going to be bothering myself about. So let that go. Too many players on the pitch. This has happened. I've seen it happen internationally, but I have heard of it. Some coaches think it's really clever if they substitute about 6 or 7 players at a time. And there have been instances where there have been too many players on the field. Decisions taken prior to correcting the situation can't be changed, even if it's been restarted. You know, it's the job of the TOs. At the major tournament, rather than sitting behind their desks, as they do on our tech benches, the TOs are actually out there on the sideline controlling substitutions and walking around from bench to bench all the time. So when we got those mass substitutions, it's usually easily controlled by the TOs, by the tech officers. But when you've got this mass substitution, 6 or 7 players, it's real easy to miss somebody going on and nobody coming off to replace her. I'm not going to say much about goalkeeping because we do have different regulations regarding goalkeeping, which I'll briefly mention now because when we get up to it, we're going to skip right through it. The rule book actually says that you can play without a goalkeeper, right? That's what the rule book says. But when that was put into the rule book, it was intended for international hockey because a lot of coaches in the latter parts of the game wanted to take the goalkeepers off and play with 11 field players. So that was put in the rule book for that purpose. But by the same token, every national association always has the right to ask the FIH if they can be exempt from using that particular rule. And every major country, Australia, Holland, Germany, Great Britain, even Wales, applied to the FIH for exemption from that rule. The reasoning being, according to our national coaches here in Australia, that if clubs were allowed to play without goalkeepers, then goalkeeping development would slide rapidly and they would no longer have the great depth of goalkeeping talent that we happen to have here in Australia at the moment. So we play with goalkeepers. Even though there's a long section on here on what you do if you don't have a goalkeeper, but we have goalkeepers, right? And that's no, you've got to have a goalkeeper. When we up to anything there? No. Now this is just some personalised things there. This is what you're asked to do. I say to umpires, when I'm coaching umpires in depth, I tell them that I want to see their personality come out on the field. I don't want them to be zombies. I don't want them to be robots. And I don't want them to be policemen. All right? I want them to show some empathy for players out there. You know, if something's funny, have a laugh about it. You know, it's not a war. It's not a battle out there. It's 2 teams of 11 and the third team of 2 umpires. And it's going to be competitive between the 2 teams, but it's up to the umpires to try to create some degree of empathy and communicate. That bottom one there, the one at the bottom there, use your common sense. I used that phrase once at a Junior World Cup in Chile, and there was a coach. The Chilean coach was sitting literally right in front of me. He was an Argentinian guy, and he was a real arrogant South American. And I said about the umpires are being told to apply common sense to their decision making. And he started laughing. So I gave him the glare and he stopped. And then he came up to me at the end and said, I'm sorry, he said, it's just that here in South America we don't usually associate common sense and umpiring together. As I said, very arrogant, middle-aged gentleman. All right, flick on. Those three words at the top there are really important. At various stages of my own umpiring career and through the progress of various Olympics and World Cups and so on, we work along those three words. Awareness, recognition, and action were actually introduced during the Beijing Olympics. I told you before we talked about professional fouls that were creeping into the game. So we showed the umpires lots of clips about these professional fouls. That was making them aware of them. The fact that people might try to do these things during the game. And then they were told to recognise them. You know, if we've talked about people pulling people's shirts to stop them running, that's the awareness. And then when it happens in the game, you've got to be able to recognise it. You know, why are somebody's knees going up and down but they're not moving? All right? Because they're being helped. Recognise it. And then most important of all, take some action about it. Do something. You know, that's what your management skills are all about. That's why you have cards. You know, if people are doing these kind of really, to my mind, quite disgraceful things that shouldn't be part of the game of hockey, then do something about it. Punish them, penalise them, get them out of the game. There's the second one. There's the third one. Set the standards early, talk to the players. That's when I was talking about creating this sense of empathy. And make it easy on yourself. We've been saying this for years and years and years, even before the quick free hits that were allowed to be taken. Get 5 metres away from the ball. And we've also said make it a big 5, which means that we go to 6, 7 metres. And it doesn't matter if anybody disputes it, because nobody's got a rule book. Nobody walks out with a tape measure. We don't carry tape measures with us to say that's 5 metres. It's always in the umpire's opinion what 5 metres is. The fact of the matter is that the further you get players away from the ball, the more open the play will be. Those last two there, I talked about game plan. Teams and coaches have game plans which will change throughout the game. You find yourself a goal down with 5 minutes to go, you've got to do something about it. You've got to change your game plan. Umpires have to change their game plans too, which means they need to know something about the game. They've got to have a good understanding of the game. Got to understand what's going on out there. And one of the ways in which they can do this is by communicating. Once again, we're not wired up here at the moment. The umpires aren't wired up. Go to a national tournament, go to an international tournament, everybody's wired up, right? You talk to each other all the time. That's what communication is all about. But we have to do without that. But we can still talk to each other. You know, before the introduction of radios at international and national tournaments, umpires were still able to communicate, you know, just by making eye contact, you know, by giving little signals to each other, by stopping the game if necessary and getting together to discuss it. If you've got 2 radios, you don't need to do that. You can do everything on the run, you know. Did that hit a foot in the circle, or was it a stick, you know? You can talk to each other, you can get the correct decision between the two of you. But if you don't have those radios, then you've got to stop and get together and say, was that a foot or was that a stick? And you come to the right decision. And that's the key thing, getting to the right decision. That's why we have video umpires now at the highest levels of the game, making sure that we get the right decision. Somebody makes a mistake, an umpire makes a mistake, and as I've said, umpires will make mistakes. The game is so fast these days that an umpire can be in a perfect position here, space all around her. She knows the ball is over there, then all of a sudden, this player's going here. And she loses sight of the ball. And at the moment she loses sight of the ball, something happens. Now that can be sorted out with a video umpire. But once again, here in Brisbane, we don't have the benefit of that, which makes it even more important that the two umpires really do act together as a team and communicate with each other. And stop the game on key, big decisions. Don't be afraid to stop the game and have a chat about it. We've got to get the right decision. And if that means stopping the game for 30 seconds or so, then do so.